hone in on what they are considering winning issues for voters. For more, I want to bring in now senior political commentator Scott Jennings, also Tom Bonier. He's a Democratic political strategist and CEO of the data and polling firm TargetSmart. Good evening to both of you. Tom, let's start with you. It's a tale of two elections here, each side focusing on different issues: Democrats, abortion and democracy; Republicans, inflation, crime, immigration. You're the data expert. Which party has the upper hand right now? Does either of them have the upper hand?
Well, honestly, the fact that you're even asking me this question at this point, a month ago, it wouldn't have been a question. Republicans were on their way to an easy win. And I don't think you could find many people who would disagree. And we saw, look, the history is in midterm elections, the party that's not in the White House, that isn't in control, wins easily. And Republicans were a bit on cruise control until the Dobbs decision. And then, something different happened. And we saw what happened in Kansas. We saw women registering to vote at levels no one has seen before. We've seen these special elections where all of a sudden Democrats are energized. So question of who has the upper hand, it's impossible to say at this point. I think Democrats have the energy on their side when you look at voter registration, when you look at turnout in the New York 19 special and the Alaska special, but we still have just about 7 weeks to go.
Yeah, listen, I think if those things that you mentioned, you said that the women voter registration, all that, if that had happened closer to the election, I think that you could maybe read more into that. But I think Republicans, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, always come home, usually come home, and are underpolled in elections. You got Roe v. Wade being overturned. That is a big motivating factor for Democrats. Now Republicans are focusing on immigration. It's certainly going to rile up the GOP base, as you see what's happening with Ron DeSantis and so on. Do you think that could also fire up Democrats, what Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott are doing?
I don't actually think so. I think as much as Republicans are focused on immigration, they're also focused on the economy, inflation, cost of living. There was a big NBC News survey done over the weekend, and they asked a very simple question: what's more important to your vote in this election? Candidates' attributes on dealing with cost of living, or candidates' position on abortion? Cost of living was like 59%, abortion was like 37%. So I actually think the disciplined Republican campaign can make use of immigration, but the real issue is still the economy and inflation. Democrats are obviously choosing to focus on something else, but the biggest issue in the race has never gone away. And so the discipline to stay on it is what's critical, I think, for a Republican campaign down the
You said the discipline one. Are all of them? Do you think they're all disciplined?
Well,
I'm asking because I just did the segment. I don't know if you saw it about the quality of Republican candidates when you have these people talking about women's suffrage.
Oh, I mean, some are and some aren't, and not as I'm sure my debating partner tonight would attest. Not all candidates are created equally when it comes to discipline and the ability to stay on message. So down the stretch, though, it's just clear to me in our data that we see it's that cost of living, quality of life kind of campaign that's ultimately going to make the difference. And it's not just immigration and inflation, it's also crime.
Yeah, that's what I want to talk about, because Democrats are trying to make this push now. They're trying to push back this narrative that the party is anti-police and soft on crime. Today, the House Democrats passing a package of policing and public safety bills. Is that going to be enough to really blunt the GOP attacks, Tom? Because it seems like it's coming a bit late in the game.
Well, Republicans clearly want to bring this election back onto their turf. I think that's what you're seeing with these migrant flights. They want the conversation to not be about choice. They want it to be about crime. I think what Democrats are doing is smart, but in the end, these voters are going to be focused on the fact we haven't had an election before where a 50-year basic human right precedent has been overturned. And so when we talk about these polls, look, the poll said Democrats were going to lose New York 19. Polls from Democratic internal campaign polls. The poll said Democrats were going to lose the Alaska special election. The poll said that the Kansas abortion vote was going to be a 1-point vote. The pro-choice position won by almost 20 points. Democrats won in Alaska. Democrats won in New York. I understand that the Republicans are trying to shift it back to a more comfortable playing field. You look at the generic ballot. today, if you look at the average of the House generic ballot polls, which is a little bit in the weeds, but it's our best indicator of where things stand in the battle for control of the House, Democrats hit their highest watermark that they've hit in the past 451 days.
But Tom, let me
their numbers have been going up. The
hear me out
Republican
here.
numbers have been going down.
I agree with you. Okay, I understand that. But wasn't that close to the impact? It's like that's when it, that's kind of when, for lack of a better term, the bomb went off, right? And so it was closer to what happened. As we get further away from the shock of that event of Roe being overturned, you don't think that that'll also have an impact where people will sort of lose interest and they may not be as motivated?
I think what we're seeing is the shock continues. When you see Lindsey Graham talking about actually filing a bill for a national federal abortion ban, the issue isn't going away. We're seeing stories of people being denied basic health care. And so what we're seeing is not only is the voter registration still surging among women and younger voters, there are some states that are actually beginning the process of voting. In states like Georgia or Pennsylvania, voters can request ballots already. And what we're seeing in those states is that Democrats and women are requesting ballots at a much higher rate than they have in past elections, including 2020.
Does that worry you, Scott? I'll give you the last word.
Not really. I mean, on the crime issue, which you started with on that question, you're seeing this play out in individual races like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, where Republicans are going heavily into the Oppo research file on Fetterman and Barnes. So I do think that's salient, and I do think it's too little too late for the Dems. On the abortion question, I disagree with Tom. I actually think Graham's position is fairly defensible, 15 weeks and the 3 exceptions. It gives any Republican a reasonable position to latch onto, and if you're willing to lean into it. But again, I'll just go back to where I started. That's not where the Republican campaign is going to be won. It is going to be won on the cost of living, quality of life.
Listen, I don't disagree with that. I think those issues are always tantamount. They're always at the top of the list. But I think that whether people believe that's a Republican's position when you have Lindsey Graham saying, this is a states' rights position, and then trying to do something else at the last minute. Yeah.
I think